Translation and adaptation of the original video for English-speaking audience was made by Dmitry of MG Owners Australia. All rights to the original content belong to Klubny Service channel, and the links are provided in the description of this video. Welcome back to another foreign car disassembly video. This time we're looking at the underbelly of RAV4 Hybrid 2022 model made in United Arab Emirates and imported into Russia. This will be one of those insightful videos that will show you some bits that are applicable to RAV4 cars that you can buy in Australia and other places in the world, but mainly focusing on what you're getting for the rather steep local price point and an obscenely long vehicle delivery waiting times, at the very least at the end of 2022 and start of 2023 in Australia. But it's also going to be a purely an insight video into just how crazy the car market is in Russia right now, in case you're interested, with all these imported vehicles that do not have the infrastructure or official dealership network to support them on the territory of the country where the vehicle will be driven. It's honestly fascinating in its own way, and hopefully you will find some enjoyment in watching this. If you do, please give me a like, don't be shy, and leave any of your thoughts in the comments down below. One last very necessary, sadly necessary, disclaimer before we jump in. Please always keep in mind the zero political nature and themes of my channel. Leave any of your political statements out of this and talk only about cars. That is what we do here. Anything else gets banned and deleted by me immediately with no hesitation. Hello ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about electricity in a way that some of us here in Europe are, well, missing out on lately. You know that I like to talk about associations sometimes, and in this particular case, you know, well, if you think about, let's say, someone being overweight like me, it is often associated with being lazy. Well, continuing this associative line, in my personal opinion, being lazy is somehow associated in my mind with owning a RAV4. Yes, I'll try and explain why, because it is an absolutely unexciting car, in my humble opinion. I'd call it a dream of housewives and that don't have many children, of course, office clerks that can afford such a car, and maybe some middle-tier managerial corporate staff. It's a car for those who are very firmly positioned in that middle class of a civilized society, but under one condition: if the car is not a hybrid vehicle. But today we're talking about a hybrid one. So let's talk about it. We're all sort of used to the idea that if it's an electric vehicle of sorts, such as, let's say, Tesla, I don't know, there won't be anything under the bonnet. Well, Japanese have their own view on this matter, thinking that hybrid vehicles have more rights to exist, at least in the current day and time, than purely electric vehicles. It's hard to disagree with them, because having an internal combustion engine gives you a much needed warmth and a certain power station, so to speak, that could also charge your battery while moving, as many hybrid cars are built to do. So in 2022, personally, I think that the design that the Japanese are following here is rather interesting, and the engine under the bonnet is much needed, you know, because the infrastructure of purely electric vehicles is not yet that much available in Russia, on the territory of Russia, and I would dare add that in Australia it's also not developed sufficiently. So having an internal combustion engine is definitely a massive benefit. If you look at the engine bay, you will see that it's rather cable rich, so to speak. Yeah, and I will admit that an average Joe Jane car owner who would look at it will be rather scared, potentially rather scared. But I want to tell everyone who is considering to buy this lovely vehicle that mainly, my friends, you should avoid frontal collisions in this car. And I know it's an obvious statement, avoid collisions, duh, but here it's a particularly important sentiment, because if you follow my line of sight here from the inverter kind of closer to where I'm standing here in the camera view, you will see that the engine control module is right here. So if you imagine a frontal hit happening it won't take all that much to get to all that much of a power of a heat to smash that, past the radiator. And once it's all gone, yeah, you will probably look at a total write-off of the vehicle, a very massive and uncomfortable, uber expensive repair costs, especially if the vehicle is out of warranty. Will be virtually impossible to negotiate with your insurance on this. Surely RAV4 models are actually quite different. So for example, there is the very famous plug-in hybrid, PHEV, that can be charged from an electric wall socket. In case you're completely unfamiliar with this, look, that's probably the most comfortable and more convenient kind of car to have right now in 2022 and 2023, because it doesn't require such a very specific, proper infrastructure that is built for electric vehicles, right? So you can be rather independent from any of that special infrastructure, hence why plug-in hybrids can be a lot more convenient for people anywhere right now in the world, while that EV specific infrastructure is still being developed in places like Australia or Russian Federation. So how long does it take to charge this kind of machine? Well, it takes about 7 to 8 hours to charge it from your normal wall socket at home. And if you have a special charging appendage that is available for these plug-in hybrids as well, the charging time apparently could be down to about 3 to 4 hours. This gives you obviously an opportunity to use electric power purely to move yourself without any petrol involved. But what does it mean exactly? Well, it means that your 2.5-liter petrol engine that is in this car won't need to start at all for those little dashes, those little trips that you would do, which is obviously quite convenient. It is convenient if you live close to work or school or nearby kind of to the shops to go pick up the groceries or pick up kids. Under those circumstances, well, I have to say that obviously it is quite great. It's a good kind of thing to have as an option. This car came to us at Klubny Service for custom sound insulation work, among other things that we do here. Under this fitting over here, you can see at the rear, first of all, we're looking at the welding of how this was welded, and it looks like it was done by some fresh intern, or maybe an Australian TAFE graduate, if you know what that institution is, who somehow was lucky enough to work in a factory in Japan or United Arab Emirates, where this particular car was assembled. You can see that the main battery of this car, which according to the technical documentation and some rumors floating around has a capacity of about 18 kilowatt, it is placed here under the rear seat. Why am I sounding so uncertain in technical specifications? Is because there is a lot of variances of these hybrid RAV4 vehicles, also depending on where exactly they are assembled, in Japan or United Arab Emirates. This particular vehicle, I have to point out, is actually not a plug-in hybrid one, but some other hybrid partly electric vehicle, but the battery is still positioned and sitting here under the rear seat. While this is not a plug-in hybrid, it's still a hybrid that recuperates its electric charge into the battery that I've just shown you, and then the energy, when it's depleted, the internal combustion engine is started, and then this cycle repeats itself. Electric motors are moving this thing ahead, and I've already mentioned that one is placed at the back. There are no mechanically connected kind of parts that would pass normally a rotating momentum from the engine that would be normally placed in the frontal engine bay towards the back, towards the wheels. Yeah, it's all done electronically over here. These electric motors, I think, produce an equivalent of about 45 to 50 or 55 horsepower output if we try to convert those numbers into something that we are a little bit more used to, I suppose, as car owners and drivers. I am not super prepared once again here on specifications and wanted to simply quickly jump in and talk to you about this slightly unusual and admittedly more interesting vehicle than some of the other ones that we're disassembling and reviewing here lately. This car can use purely electrical power and move itself for about 65 kilometers, and overall power output can be different once again depending on the exact model, but it's something from ranging from 160 to maybe 300 horsepower. As you can see right now, the whole console is taken out and the car is pretty much fully disassembled, so all the buttons related to electric functions of the car are currently missing. But if we take a closer look at the design of the whole frontal panel, that dash, yeah, it looks like your normal RAV4. It doesn't just look like a RAV4, but it drives quite similarly to it too, actually. Official specifications suggest that it speeds up to 100 in about 6 seconds, but in reality, we all know very much that these things are taking, a bit more than that. So cutting to the chase, we are looking at a rather poorly equipped car that was sold for a very large amount of money. The actual vehicle was made to be sold in United Arab Emirates. It was not made for export into some other country. So, given the current car import processes into Russia, no doubt affected by ongoing political landscape, these processes are, let's put it mildly, a bit murky to say the least. So this car doesn't come and didn't come with any proper instructions or owner's manual for that matter. Certainly no dealership network support. And the owner who bought the car honestly admitted to people at Klubny Service that he didn't understand the purpose of half of those buttons, what they meant, and the use of the car on the territory of Russia will be full of unpredictable elements and surprises, to say the least. Not many people would normally buy into. So under these circumstances, this car I would say is for a real nerd or a geek, depending on what terminology you prefer to use yourself. It would be very hard to service this car in Russia these days, as the parts required for servicing, etc., would all be very, very, very rare, would have to be ordered from outside of the country once again and imported at extortionist prices, probably, especially something like the battery. And I would obviously say that I personally would be buying something a lot more mainstream, so to speak, because we have honestly no idea how to properly service this thing, no matter how well it was built originally, even if we speculate that it was built better. But we're about to talk about that a little bit more. Why, would you ask me, these crazy Russians are buying these cars in Russia these days if they are so expensive and largely unknown, full of those potentially unpleasant surprises? Well, because some people have courage and money. And plus, some buy into this promised crazy fuel economy, which in this case is stated as something along the crazy lines of 0.8 to 0.9 liters of petrol per 100 kilometers. Obviously, you and I understand that that's a vacuum-based speculation and specification, which is very, very different from real-life uses that are being reported to be more along the lines of 3.5 liters per 100 kilometers, which is still rather impressive economy, wouldn't you say? In principle, this fuel economy is somewhat similar to what you can expect from something like Toyota Prius, which is built, by the way, using similar, slightly more aging kind of, but similar technologies. So are there any benefits to owning this car? If someone buys it to drive a lot, every day, covering short distances, then yes, it probably makes sense to buy it. But if you don't drive that much, there is absolutely no reason to go for a hybrid Toyota in the end of 2022, start of 2023. Because, like I said, whether you are in Russia or elsewhere, these cars are very expensive upfront, and any minor accident might end up in a very expensive repair or a total write-off, so I would personally spend my money elsewhere. Hybrid cars are supposed to be very quiet on the road, but it's actually not that quiet to drive in this vehicle, at least according to the owner who drove this car already for about 1,000 kilometers. Is eventually deciding that they need some sort of custom sound insulation done to the car, which was, that's what we do here. But for us here in Australia, not in Russia, we very rarely do these aftermarket kind of additions, and probably can use this part of the video as an indicator that having paid a substantial amount of money like this RAV4 Hybrid, you can't still properly enjoy your ride, especially if it gets a little bumpy. You can't just pay massive amount and forget about everything else. You know, so potentially you would still hear that road noise that most of us just kind of learned to ignore here in Australia, because our roads are also on average much better than they are in Russia, right? But as you can see, in Russia, people who respect themselves, they opt into these custom aftermarket services for example, this extra sound insulation work that this car clearly needs. Another thing that the owner of this car, who bought it for a relatively massive amount of money, realized is that there were no powered seats, no powered tailgate, no panoramic sunroof that they apparently put into RAV4s that are going for American market distribution. And it generally doesn't feel like a premium paint either, with any sort of protection applied to it. Like a lot of people laugh at paint protection, say in Australia once again, but in Russia, many Russian owners in Russian weather conditions, including winter, they go for it actually quite often. They actually opt into this aftermarket addition. This car also has a relatively thin metal, which is interesting, and that's why I'm touching it here rather carefully. I had an older Toyota, and I actually remember that when the doors used to be opened and closed by not very particularly careful people, you could actually occasionally see those little dents appearing here and there. So once again, I think that this car is a questionable choice for real geeks who absolutely love modern technologies in spite of all the logic and reason, to go ahead and buy, you know, such an expensive electro-powered headache. On the other hand, I do also understand people who can afford this, because we only have one life and one needs to, you know, have fun their own way, trying something new, trying something different. Maybe they get excitement out of these new technologies, buying toys, so to speak, including these cars. Give it 10-15 years. Sure, it's not maybe around the corner, but it's coming our way fast enough. And while right now, in this transitional period, we are seeing these petrol electric hybrid solutions, eventually petrol and diesel fuel-based engines surely will become part of the history. The world is changing right in front of our eyes, and I'm sure you would agree it's completely out of your or my hands. So maybe it is time to at least look at these transitional steps broader, with an open mind. But of course, while we have a petrol available and there are plenty of V6, V8 engine powered cars, I personally don't see any reason to overpay for these technologies just yet right now, as 10-15 years of transition to electrical world is still a very long time ahead of us, as I'm sure you would agree. If you and I pay for this age of technological progress right now, you and I won't see this money ever again. I think that is clear to both of us. And while some people are trendsetters, early adopters, so to speak, not everyone is. We also have to keep in mind that second-hand car market, where the interest of general population in the older electric and hybrid vehicles with, let's say, a car battery that's served already for many hours and might be due for replacement, ideally, that interest could be rather low. You potentially would be looking for a buyer for a very long time, especially again in Russia. Doesn't apply to us, but very much applies to them. Well, like I said, this kind of stuff would cost you to replace like buying a new vehicle probably. And again, not to mention any potential other problems, repairs or fixes. Wrapping this up, my opinion is that if you have obscene amounts of money, my friends, and ultimately money solves every issue in any part of the world wherever you are. Question, as always, is only the quantity of the money that you have at your disposal. Yeah, if you are in that privileged segment of the buyers, and you can afford all of what I've described to you, yeah, then of course buy new toys, play with them, enjoy while it lasts. And with that, I wish you a pleasant day from all of us in Klubny Service Moscow. Adapted translation of this material was made by, as always, by yours truly, Dmitry from MG Owners Australia channel. Give the video a like if you found it informative or somewhat entertaining, to help YouTube algorithm decide to show this video to more viewers. As more of us here, more of us communicating, chatting in the comments, the merrier. I thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.